Hello, welcome back, everyone. This is Peter and Mihai for another episode in our ongoing playlist of reigniting the fragments of the fourth way. This is episode 24, and you'll see below the previous episodes where we are exploring in depth, both theoretically as well as from our own personal verification, experience, application with ourselves, as well as working with others, some of the key concepts, practices, ideas of the fourth way system as introduced by Gurdjieff and Uspensky, as well as integrating them with non-duality, Advaita Vedanta, a direct path, as well as I cannot help but keep in mind a clinical perspective as I'm working with people's hearts and minds that are suffering, and I keep that in mind too. So this episode is on what Gurdjieff and Uspensky would call one of the chief obstacles to self-consciousness, to conscious evolution. And in the system, there are 6 of them, and we touched on some of them. But today it's going to be on this obstacle of lying, lying to oneself, as well as lying to others, lying to ourselves, deceiving ourselves, both in, so to say, ways in which we are aware, the so-called external lying, which is interesting that Uspensky in the fourth way, when he's asked about lying, he says, well, I will put aside all external lying for now. And then he got into the internal lying, how we lie, deceive ourselves. And from what I've seen, he didn't get back to the external lying. I do want to touch on that because that external lying is rich of ego and pain and wounds and the mechanical strategic adaptations. And I myself have a lot of
And
experience with
fear.
fear. So that's the topic. And Uspensky gave this map, or Gurdjieff, of obstacles. So first of all, we are taught in the fourth way to learn how to observe ourselves in a certain way and how to be more present, and then how to go towards remembering ourselves, being aware of being in the present moment, as well as whatever arises in the being. And that is the core method. However, we are given this map, like, as you are doing the best you can to do that, you got to look at these aspects of your life, of your life of sleep, mechanicality, identification, daydreaming, reactivity, emotional reactivity, unnecessary talk, daydreaming. And so this was areas where we can not just, oh, just know who you are, rest as awareness, and everything will be well, everything will take care of itself. It's more like, hey, yeah, learn to be more present and more aware of one's presence, which in itself, this is very advanced, to be presence, to be aware of one's presence. It's hard to do that when we have so much unconscious mechanical habits and contradictions and lies. So the idea was to tackle them, because in each one of these obstacles, among which is lying to oneself, that is some core aspect of our false self, or false personality, as they call it in the fourth way. So in order to go deeper into being, we can't, if the false imaginary self is thick and pervasive. So the practical way to do is to bring awareness to it and investigate it, struggle with it in a particular way, in order for that this imaginary self, we've done a previous video was on the imaginary self, false personality. We recommend it's seen through, it lightens up, it gets looser, and then it allows, so these are the clouds, the storms, we can't, the sun cannot be aware of itself if there's all these clouds and darkness. So somehow the way to go is to part this darkness for the sun of what we are to shine forth.
And to understand, Mihai, that awareness is these impediments, the fourth way calls obstacles, they are really areas in which our awareness, consciousness has become entrenched, embedded. So it's not a matter of, as you're saying, just going to abiding as awareness, because awareness is, it's like it has its feet in the mud. It has to pull its own feet, the material of itself out of the mud. It is identified with this person as a person. The identification with this body and mind, as some teachings say, or as the fourth way says, the four centers, the lower centers. Awareness is identified with these, and as a consequence, this feeling of I forms in the four centers, in the body mind. And so just lying is one example how what we're really trying to do is awareness is trying to understand how to extract itself from this soup. And this soup in this case is the lying. So it's not like there's awareness and then there's lying. There's a strong connection here in its identification. And so to understand lying is really to understand a particular way in which awareness becomes identified. We become an identity, and then we feel we need to protect that identity and also hide that identity from other people because it's an imagined thing. And we'll get into that more, but
yeah.
So it's all tied together, awareness, this particular thing called lying. And we'll be looking at too, when we take away this word lying, let's throw that away. We can even throw the word away. What are we really talking about here? Relative to consciousness and awareness.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of lay out a little bit
Yes.
what we have received in terms of from the system. So in the fourth way system, lying is, first of all, Gurdjieff was saying that as a species, he was saying that as a species, the human being, as a zoological species, he would say that it was a lying animal. And because it's one of the very few animals that are lying, and it's such a big pervasive part of their inner life, lying. And he's talking not just about this so-called external lying, lying to others for various reasons, um, being out of integrity. So these two, but also this lying takes different forms. One form is that talking about things that we don't know, and we talk about them with an air of authority and as if we know. Yeah, we talk about things that we don't know as if we know, and wiseacre about it. Another form of lying, like for instance, God, myself, reality, truth, what people are thinking, how things should be. All of this is like that, lying. Another aspect of lying is exaggerating, embroidering things for other various subconscious reasons, to aggrandize oneself or to appear more interesting or to avoid discomfort or to get ahead. Another idea in the system about lying is that we can't even if we really decide and we are really touched and we're like, yeah, I want not to lie, I want to tell the truth. It's not possible because in the second state where we start the work from, in where we are asleep to what we are and identified and lost in thoughts and reactivity, we do not know our personality, and the personality is made of different parts, different subparts that are separated from one another from what's called buffers. So then one part comes along that is a king for a day, that says, I this, I believe that, I am going to do this, I decide from now on to like this. But then this part is kicked, kicked away, another part comes in. It's another king for a day that says, I decide something else and I change my mind. So basically, even if we really genuinely want to, due to the low state of consciousness in the second state, that is not possible. And because we don't have some overseer quality, there's no will initially, and we don't even know what is true and what is false in oneself. As well as from one angle, in the second state, the word I is a lie. When we say I want this, I don't like this, it bothers me. The word I and me is a lie, because in the second state, the state of sleep, we attach the word I to every fragment. We attach it to a fragment, to a thought, to a feeling, to a imagining, to as they call in the fourth way, to one of the many eyes. One of the many eyes takes on the I, which is actually I should be reserved to I. What really I is the real I, is that which is aware, the presence of awareness. So that will be the esoteric meaning of some of the ancient commandments, that thou shalt not take the name of Lord in vain. So I see each time we say I, that's actually taking God's name in vain. Any other thoughts you have here, Peter, in terms of what we have received from the system, or any other way you want to go with it?
Well, just too that lying takes the form of deceiving. And usually we see it. It's easier to see in terms of how we deceive others, how we lie in little ways and big ways. We're trying to deceive, mislead, misguide as a protection or an avoidance. We don't want to be shown up or punished or caught or suspected, whatever it may be. But it has this other component of self-deception. And that's what we're looking at really, is how, in what way are we deceiving ourselves with this thing called, what's behind the top layer of the lying as far as self-deception goes? And it speaks to what you were saying, Mihai. It's because we mistake ourselves for these eyes. This is the original sin, the original temptation, the original lie. And it's not bad that we have these eyes, and it's not bad that they manifest. But the question is, do we know within our being, when we manifest as an I, like this I is now speaking, do we know in our being that's the manifestation of one I in its place, in its appropriate place? But that's not the being behind it in the depths out of which it is arising, or emerging, manifesting. This is something very different. And so we're deceived, this self-deception, it's not in the sense of, we're not trying to trick ourselves. We're fooled. We have fooled ourselves. It's not even like we are deceiving ourselves. We ourselves have been deceived by what Advaita Vedanta would call ignorance. We're falling into this trap of identity. And again, this is not bad, but there's a bigger reality behind this. And that's where we're trying to, again, we mentioned recently, I think, peering behind the curtain to find the Wizard of Oz, the ego, the false personality, the imaginary I who's running this show of identity. And lying is another curtain we're trying to pull aside and see what's going on back there in terms of self-deception. You know, if you were to ask the Wizard of Oz, he would think he's doing the right thing. And that's how our ego, our sense of I feels. It's doing the right thing. And yet that it's not the real thing. But it appropriates that and takes on the role of I am the real thing, this ego, this internal sense of identity. And so when we talk about lying, that's what we're trying to get at. We're not really trying to become this person who never lies. There are plenty of people who try to do that, and they do it in the name of religion. They do it in the name of social morality. They do it in the name of family values. And that just becomes actually another form of self-deception, oddly enough. And so that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what's going on behind the scenes here psychologically. And that's what Gurdjieff, that's what his map, he left two maps, really, a psychological map and a cosmological map. And we're following his psychological map to investigate this source of this phenomenon, psychological phenomenon, which is what it is, called lying. Animals and plants don't lie. And also, we don't lie to animals and plants when you stop and think about it, which is very interesting. We lie to people. We lie to other egos.
Mm-hmm.
This is what's so interesting about this thing called lying from one perspective. And another thing I just wanted to say before we go into it farther is something to keep in mind when we're talking about this, or when you're thinking about this topic, is what would your life be like? What would our existence be like without this phenomenon called lying? This is very interesting to consider. What would it be like not to deceive ourselves about who and what we are, and then not to deceive ourselves in relation to other people, and then not to deceive other people? Now, oddly enough, this doesn't mean we would just walk down the street all day telling the truth, so-called truth, the great truth to everybody. We still have a role to play. It's useful that we have a personality. These masks can be useful in certain situations. That's not what we're talking about. Some people do that. I'm just going to tell everybody what I feel all the time and what I think and what I see about them. And no, we're talking about conscious truth. Consciousness, in a way, not deceiving itself about what it really is. Yes, consciousness falls into the deception of thinking that it is the self. And then all the rest unfolds from there. But go back to my point. What would our life be like if we didn't lie, if we didn't have this, we didn't deceive ourselves, and we didn't try to deceive anybody else? First from the inside and then on the outside, but first from the inside. What if I felt no need to protect myself from the inside, so I didn't lie? If my wife says, Peter, I've just taken the trash out, she says, did you separate the recycling? And I know that, there was that tomato jar that had all the tomato sauce in it. It was all yucky. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to rinse out that jar and put it in the recycling. I'm just going to toss it in the garbage can. But I say, oh yes, yeah, I recycle. I separated all's good, because there's this, like, I don't want to get punished. I don't want to feel the pressure. I don't want to have to get into a tangle about recycling. I'm just using this as an example. But there are little examples like this. I know that in my work, I do writing projects, and I can think of times where in the past, the boss or the manager or someone comes and says, is that report about ready? I think, didn't you say you were going to have that report to me this afternoon? I said, oh, well, you know what? I'm almost done. In fact, if you don't mind, I'll have that to you first thing in the morning. I've had a few, hiccups here and there, but it's in good shape, and I'm going to have it to you in the morning. And the truth is, I haven't started on it. I'm lying to give myself enough time to get it done, so I will look good, be approved of, not be punished, not have my job threatened. It's a lot of little things going on here of fear and hiding and misguiding and misleading and avoiding. But when you trace it all back, it comes back to this sense of identity. Covering its tracks. Do you know the word? I learned something interesting, Mihai. The word lie, of course, in English has two meanings. It means to mislead, to deceive. It also means to get in a horizontal position, to lie down. And what I learned is that in a number of Slavic languages, it also has this same double meaning. And not in all languages, but in some. And when you think about it, this is what happens. Our consciousness lies down. It sort of renders itself inert, out of operation. It just lies down. instead of confronting the reality of what's happening and being there for it and being here and owning it, taking responsibility for what's happening and for my actions from inside, instead of lying down, to stand up and be and deal with the situation, even if it means, you know what, darling, but I was recycling, but that tomato jar, you know what, I decided to throw that one in the trash, and then deal with whatever the reaction might be. So it's again a small example. We're covering, we're always dodging and avoiding, and it's very common. This idea gets short shrift in the fourth way.
Yeah.
Imagination, identification, inner considering, negative emotions get all the attention.
Yeah.
And then unnecessary talk gets some, but lying doesn't get so much usually, but it's actually a byproduct of inner considering often. Our lying is often a byproduct of inner considering, and we have some videos on that topic too. We are reacting from a place where we are identified with how other people will perceive us and perceive our actions and perceive our persona. And we are identified with that and we react accordingly. And one of the reflexes, psychological reflexes, is to lie.
That's interesting. In the Romanian, the word to lie or lie has almost every word that the word mind. I never thought about it, but you were saying that it might have a double meaning. So like it's almost the same as mind. But I agree with you. It's been not explored enough, this aspect. And actually in my first fourth way community, yeah, it was not talked about. I, as a student, was lying. I lied all my life as a kid. My teacher was lying. There was a lot of lying happening and deception and manipulation. So I actually want to touch on this, this so-called external lying. And also it makes me think of in Buddhism, Buddha, he had different stages of the training. And it's like the first stage was this called, I forgot how it's called in Pali, but it was ethics, that as a foundation. And only then there will be this kind of cultivating awareness, concentration, samadhi. And only then there will be like being and non-duality and whatever. So there's this element of ethics. And I can see that in ancient traditions, this was in traditions in the past, there was this element that was important. And I see how in modern day YouTube, spirituality, and especially non-duality and Neo Advaita, it's somehow this thrown away. It can be thrown away, not talked about, it doesn't matter, blah, 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 all kind of reasons why it doesn't matter. What only matters is that some lofty spiritual understanding, and the teacher is hiding his problems. The teacher is not talking about things. The teacher is out of integrity. The teacher is tricking people, taking advantage, is cheating his wife. He's all doing all of this basic human ego stuff while coming there, sitting in satsang and being all goody-goody and noble. So I want to caution like people that are serious into work, that it's important to clean up, to clean up one's this personal stuff. And I have lots of experience because my own childhood pattern that later became like core aspect of my personality, which I wasn't even working on because I was lying to myself, I was deceiving myself. I was working on all kind of other aspects, on vanity, on this, on not gesticulating, on various good stuff. I was doing good work, but a completely blind spot of this hiding, lying, tricking, and being deceitful and straightforward lying to people's face. And I can see from clinical work that, you know, this is not because I was a bad kid. That's some kind of, some types. We have different types and we have different tendencies to adapt to life, you know, and some they have some way of dealing with life by being strong, head on, other being kind of afraid, other kind of being more controlling and dominant, and other being more sneaky. So there are different indirect manipulation, you know. So
Yes,
yeah.
and it's interesting to point that out, that to stress that different people, but because we're different types and the different centers predominate in each of us differently. So the different types lie in different ways. This is another nuance of this topic. Lying is not one prescribed thing.
Mhm.
It can be quite nuanced. It can be direct. It can be indirect. People deceive themselves each in different ways. And this
Mhm.
is where it comes down to personal study.
Yeah. So apart from these mechanics, you know, we have certain mechanics. Our biocomputer has different trims, so to say. But there's also, from my psychological clinical work, I discovered this experientially with everybody, that due to certain environment in which they are raised, the kid, the essence, basically one's essence, adapts in order to seek safety, love, and approval. And then we develop, basically, and also due to certain kind of initial wounding, a certain hurt, which can come as a form of harshness, violence, abuse, neglect, various things, then one adapts and becomes slightly different. So the beginning of false personality of the ego forms. And some people adapt by becoming industrious. Some people adapt by becoming kind of perfect and goody-goody. Some people adapt from being charming and seductive and being funny. Some people adapt by not needing anybody. I don't need anybody. I will do it all myself. I can't trust anybody. Some people adapt by becoming hiding and lying as a strategy of defense. So that is formed from a 4-year-old, 5-year-old that has been shocked. There's some shock that happened there. And the 5-year-old consciousness essence learns that in order to keep oneself safe, to hide and lie, in order to avoid punishment, avoid again that shock, or get what we want, you know. So I have a lot of experience with this. I have compassion towards this, but I can see that this pattern coexisted with serious inner work for 20 years. I mean, it's very strong. And also I could see how it would leak energy and how much suffering it would create. Because whenever this pattern comes in and hiding, lying, then there's really like a contracted sense of painful sense of state, which is very extremely different than like open, expansive presence of awareness. It's like very different. And also at the human level of the game, it perpetuates a certain stuckness, you know? So I created so much suffering in my life and suffering to other people with, and then I couldn't go further without cleaning this ship first, or at least to a large degree. So I really want to emphasize this. Also, this element of being in integrity, you know, this being in integrity, like, hey, I say who I say I am, I do what I say I do, and if I make a promise, give my word, fulfill it, which from one angle, it's impossible for a man machine. But so this being impeccable with one's word and telling the truth, and keeping one's word and all of that, it's a very good practice to grow up from one angle. You know, this idea of waking up, clean up, grow up. This is part of cleaning up and growing up, you know, and it will make life easier and won't be stuck keeping ourselves stuck. You know, I have a lot of passion and kind of anger about it because I've done this to myself for so long.
Also, it's well known in psychology and philosophy, and you see it in literature and you see it in real life. When we lie, then we usually end up having to lie to cover up that lie. And then if it continues, we have to lie to cover up the lie that we used to cover up the original lie. So it becomes a web we weave. And then if it ever comes to the point of breaking through to complete honesty, it's so difficult because there's so many layers of it now. We've lied to lie about lying and so on. It's very strong. And that's the external part.
Yeah.
But when you unweave that, it comes back to inside, and it comes back to this thing about lying to ourselves psychologically, and then even deeper, the lie that consciousness is, awareness is these manifestations. And it reminded me that Jesus in the Gnostic Gospels said something very powerful when his disciples asked him, well, Master, what should we do? What disciplines should we follow? Should we not eat this or not eat that or not do this? He said simply two things. He said, do not lie and do not do what you hate. This is very powerful. Like maybe all the commandments from the Old Testament roll up into reality for someone who's really trying to become more conscious, be more real. Do not lie in all the ways that we've been talking about. Most importantly, internally, do not lie. Do not deceive yourself. Do not be deceived about what you really are, first and foremost. And then that other side, do not do what you hate, is also an interesting topic to explore. We're not going to explore that one today, but that's also very powerful, has a lot of depth to it. So this is central. This goes to the core of spiritual depth. That was the words that came to mind were spiritual accomplishment or spiritual achievement or spiritual heights, but it's more reality. You know, that, I mean, reality is truth, really. Also the truth about things as they are.
You know, I want to stay a little bit more with this, just more basic level of psychological lying, because I don't think it's practical, this thing like, hey, I'm lying to myself by believing to be the body and the mind. I'm
Yes.
lying to because there's nothing you can do about it unless
Yes.
one realizes that I'm not that. So
Yes.
that's totally philosophy.
But that's also why we want to keep it in mind.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it is against that backdrop, that larger context of what we really are. If we don't stay connected to that, then lying becomes its own, it just becomes a corrective measure psychologically. And that's not, but yes, I think it will benefit from going into more detail about this
Like
more
what you said.
ostensible form of lying.
You said, oh, if you're lying, then you have to lie to cover it up. So what I want to say here is that we do know when we are lying. And then, so then we have, basically there is now guilt and there's fear of getting caught, and there is guilt, there is shame, and then this kind of creates a little like a burning kind of like and then it also more embroidery, like, oh man, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, it may come, or feeling of this conscience, but then that is pushed back in order to keep lying. And then out of that comes this subconscious need to be punished. Really, it's like that. I've seen it. Some kind of something wants to come out, but then it's pushed down. So all of this, there are really layers and layers of dense, painful energy that will prevent us from realizing what we are, because that is too thick. So
Mm.
that's really important to purify. This is that's why Buddha would say to work on this stuff, as of course, not just to be a good person, but as a basic purification to go to higher
Mm-hmm.
levels of truth. And yeah, I mean, it's so liberating, and it's all this
Mm.
stress, and this basically it enforces the sense of me carrying all of this lying, fear of being caught, guilt, shame, a feeling that I create suffering. All of this, they are like a big burden, feeling out of accountability, then 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 feeling that I can't trust myself. This is, often people come with this and they are burdened, and so this is just healing. It's a level of healing and cleaning up, but not doing this level and going into transcendental stuff is not recommended.
I just thought too, Mihai, based on what you're describing, that lying is like opacity. We become opaque. And the absence of lying is transparency.
Yeah.
And it's transparency within us, transparency between us and other people. And there's a lightness, a clarity to this transparency, as opposed to the more we lie, the more opaque, the more thick the veil becomes. But you said something interesting I had not thought about before. And it sounds like it's based on your clinical work, which is very interesting. This idea, correct me if I'm wrong, if I heard it wrong, you said, this is how I would restate it, that we know when we're lying, and this can create an inner reaction in us psychologically where we feel guilty. And then because we know we are guilty of lying, that we should be punished. This is very interesting. I had not thought of this like this before until you just said it, that because we know maybe from youth, if we did lie, we got punished. If we got caught, we got punished. But it's not just that. It's more that, and the reason I was pointing this out, in a previous video when we were talking about compulsion, we said guilt is poor man's conscience. Conscience is seeing the truth about the fact that we lied. Guilt is feeling that we ought to be punished about lying. Those are very different roads to travel down when we reach this point where we can either go to honesty, clarity, truth, reality, presence of being, to covering up identity, hiding, lying. They diverge. Or are they more like this? One goes down and one goes up. But yes, this is very interesting. But this is still poor man's conscience. This wanting to, I need to be punished. I lied. And if nobody else is going to punish me, I'll punish myself psychologically because I lied. Yeah.
Ourselves.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Consciously.
This is another nuance on the psychological side of what this phenomenon, how it operates in us, how it manifests. And again, when it does that, that's the lower road, you might say. When it goes down, that awareness is pulled down that lower road. And again, this comes back to, we're trying to be more awake, more conscious, more aware. And what happens is our awareness starts to burrow down that hole as a feeling of self-identity. In this case, a negative form, a negative feeling. I'm bad, I lied, I ought to be punished, kind of thing. Which happens, I'm sure you would agree, Mihai, without words.
Yeah.
It's a feeling of, yeah.
It's a subconscious. It's subconscious, and also it, as I said, also reinforces if we have lots of out of integrity things, it develops now a thicker sense of false self, that of being not good enough or unworthy or a fuck up, which is, again, it's like very dense, low, condensed false self. And then now that has a lot of pain in it, and now I need to escape that pain with vodka or cigarettes or whatever, drugs or compulsion. So you see, it becomes like a knot. So for me, actually, it was very helpful after years of doing fourth way work, and then I left it. And I came to some kind of men's work that were not interested in enlightenment. And I felt my personality felt superior. I felt that I'm better than them, superior and vanity. But they were interested to be a man of integrity and to be in accountable to one's word and to one's actions from week to week. And they were interested to, if the one was out of integrity with oneself or others, to tell the truth in a group and to find out what drove that. Hey, you said last time that you are going to do this and now you didn't.
You mean what
What's
drove
this about?
the lying or the non-commitment?
There will be basically, if we were out of accountability or integrity with our promises, either clear agreements or inner agreements. Yeah, this creates a feeling of out of integrity, which is a feeling of offness.
Mm-hmm.
So we were encouraged before doing any deeper work to notice if we are clear with ourselves or others. And if we were not, we had some way to process, first of all, by telling the truth. Like, hey, yes, I have done that. Yes. And then to, without shaming or guilting ourselves, to find out what part of myself was driving the bus that did this thing
Mm-hmm.
in order to be more free from it. So we call it to have the shadow in front of you, not the shadow self, which would be another way of some personality, ego self to be in charge. And to me, I was like, whoa, this was much more basic, and I had large gaps in that. So that is an important, more preliminary thing.
I
You
wanted
know,
to touch on too that part of what you said, that feeling, that knot that starts to form, and this feeling is, and it's this is the opposite of the feeling of conscience. When the knot starts to tie up in itself, there's this not a good feeling. And conscience begins at right at the surface of that, where there's still the realization and it's not comfortable to see that we've lied or that we haven't told the truth or we didn't follow through, whatever it is. But then when it, now from conscience, it can actually go into more expansive consciousness of awareness. And this is a lighter, it's like the energy can rise now instead of
yeah.
going down in this thing. And this is why it is important to own the
Mm-hmm.
truth that we have lied, to
Mm-hmm.
own the truth that we are deceiving ourselves or trying to deceive others. So to get back to the place where this trap door can open and this energy that went in there and got trapped can come out, can be released. Yeah, it's interesting. We trust, it's weird. Human beings trust lying more than they trust the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? That's a,
Mhm.
but this is, I know that's been true in most of my life. I trusted lying in many forms more than I trusted the truth. And to trust the truth is it's a stronger staff to walk with through life than trusting lying and relying on lying and hiding behind lying and pretending to be in all these things.
Well, I feel like it's, and I'm sure that to do justice to this topic, just because of timing, so we'll cover a little bit more, but we got to have another part
Yes.
because there are many things we haven't talked about.
Yeah, we just started squeezing this sponge. Yeah. Yes.
Well, we need to, yeah, there are things we need to talk about, like this actual area of authenticity and being real with oneself and honoring one's yeses and nos and not tricking oneself. And also, this other area that, if you have a formatory mind, black and white thinking, it may be like, hey, now I have to tell the truth to everybody all the time. No, that will be, Gurdjieff will say, to be honest all the time with everybody is stupidity. So there's this element also of intentional insincerity, which is a very tricky area. So we'll cover on that, and we'll have big topic there with this realness, authenticity, not going against oneself, and But coming back to finish what we started here, yeah, this element of that a lot of energy is used, leaked into maintaining the lie and all the psychological embroidery. And so I can see, in even ancient teaching, ancient Christian teachings, there's this principle of confession. Confession, which, forget about sin, because the sin is a mistranslation and being we are going to have a video on esoteric Christianity soon. But this also in the 12-step work, which is a pathway in some way that can lead to a preliminary awakening and definitely cleaning up and aligning to truth. They say this thing: if you fall off again, if you fall off your lapse, they say that secrecy, to have something which is hidden from anybody, that nobody knows, that will fester into this shame and will fester into this toxic shame, and will fester into some yucky psychological yuckiness. So there's this principle in various traditions to confess, to tell the truth. In the 12th step, they had this thing to tell the truth to yourself, to higher power, and to another human being. And I found this very helpful, and sometimes it was hard to. I was like, yeah, I confess to myself and seemingly to God, but man, I was hiding and had so much shame to tell to someone else. So it was a big release to, even with my partner, I had a wise friend, and I would say, Dave, I have all of this thing I want to tell you. I just want you to listen to me. So to have a wise friend and say, I lied, I tricked them, I have did this, I've done that. And he was just like, anything else? And it was so like, there's so much sense of separation, and pain body is formed to keep this on. So and remember David Hawkins, he was saying that in the scale of consciousness from 0 to 1,000, and from 500 is the levels of awakening, and 600 is enlightenment, and so on. 200 is the level of truth and integrity. So it's 200 is where the darkness starts to turn into light. So that's very essential,
Your description also reminded me about the similar kind of effect that happens when we're wrong and then we apologize. There's a lightness, there's a relief, because we were wrong, or we falsely accused someone, or we did something, and we usually don't want to confess that we were wrong. And when an apology is like a confession. We're saying, I'm sorry, I thought this, and I misunderstood. I didn't have all the facts, and I apologize. I was wrong to say that to you, or to treat you that way, or to do what I did. And it is a form. Anyway, it is a form. That's confessing too, and that's also it's the same emergence that happens out of lying, to emerge out of lying, to rise above out of lying in ourselves, is kind of the same thing. So apologizing can be a good practice in little and big ways. Some people have a very hard time apologizing for things, even when they know they're wrong, cannot bring themselves to apologize, because it would mean yielding identity.
But this apologizing really has to be more like intentional or conscious thing, because sometimes that can be taken like, okay, I'm sorry, yeah, okay.
Yes, no, I'm talking about the deeper kind, yeah.
It has to be owning, telling the truth, owning, it has to be genuine, heartfelt. And in men's work, I was a lot of men's work, they will say, hey, I'm sorry. It's not going to cut it. how is it going to be different next time?
Mm.
How are you going to be different next time? So because I'm sorry, even if it's heartfelt, it can be a cop out, like, hey, please get me off the hook, get me off the hook. And so
in that case, the energy doesn't change.
yeah,
But when a let's call it a conscious apology is a different, there's an
yeah,
energy change. And done in the right way, it actually allows something to be different in the future.
yeah. Huh.
But the other thing is when it's just a getting me off the hook. Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Come on, let's move on. No, nothing changes there in that moment, and therefore nothing can change in another moment. But this is what we're talking about. Something actually changes in the moment of a heartfelt so-called
Yeah.
apology or coming out from behind. It's the ego being exposed, is what it is. Both of these lying, the apologizing, all that. Yes, we have to have the courage
Mm-hmm.
to part the curtain on our own ego and let the light in. And in a way, that's what I understand the 12-step program to be. You're using God and other people and other to let light in.
Mm-hmm.
They become like a lens or a way to let light into your own being,
Mm-hmm.
so that you're really honest about being honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I mean, the first step is like, hey, I am powerless over this. I can't manage it. That's the truth. I can't manage it. So, that is a powerful owning of my powerlessness over some type of compulsive sleep behavior. But coming back to what you said here, the true apologizing, it involves a bunch of side processes. So I use this process with people when they have guilt based on that they have done something and they know that was off. Yeah. So so I just walk them through a series of steps, like, first of all, to tell the truth to me, the data. Hey man, first of all, to also realize what is the agreement that they broke. It's not just being bad, but hey, I have this ongoing agreement with myself to be honest, or I told my partner this thing and then I went against it. Yeah. So first of all, to state what was the agreement with which I'm out of integrity. Second step is to tell, hey, did I keep this agreement? Yes or no? No, I lied. Okay. So just telling the truth with no justification, no embroidery, and then going for a series of other steps, like, what is the impact? What's the impact on me of this? And what's the impact on her of this? And then to look into, hey, is this just one time? Is it just one time, or is this a pattern here? And very likely it's a pattern there. And then to see what drives that. That's important. In order to no longer do it again, you need to find out what drives it. There's some deeper kind of ego pattern that has a certain strategic thing, and to see it. Because if we don't see it, well, surely it's going to come again. It's going to come again even if we see it. And then realizing what's underneath, and then having a choice point, like, here, hey man, is this the man I want to be? Is this how I want to operate? Like, tricking people for personal benefit. I don't care about other people and just do me. And then so it's a clean awakening of conscience, telling the truth to oneself and another, that will lead to genuine emotional energy in order to shift from that level. So then apology will come after all of this, and it has a power, is not empty.
And we're also touching on what the fourth way talks about with the term buffers.
Mm-hmm.
Because as Gurdjieff pointed out, we can't lie without buffers.
Mm.
And these are like wordless psychological comforters that give us permission to lie. This is the other thing. You can't just stop lying by itself if you don't understand how the permission to lie is being granted is being enabled, is being allowed. And it happens instantaneously. It's lightning quick, these buffers. We don't see them in ourselves, but suddenly we lie. And there are buffers that we do other things to express certain types of negative emotions similarly, because there's a buffer there in our habits. So this is, hopefully we'll get into this too eventually, this topic, which is a nuanced topic as well. So lying is not single dimension. It's not one dimensional by any means. And I think that's become evident today in our talk here, Mihai. There are multi dimensions to this phenomenon of lying, and self-observation, as called in the fourth way, or self-investigation in other traditions, involves seeing all these. Again, we come back. The illusion is tricky. As the Tibetans, I read once, or you told me once from Tibetans, the illusion is tricky, has many sides. This illusion of identity.
So, yeah, I'm really actually surprised and happy that we touched a lot on this element that Ouspensky put aside. They said, well, let's put all external lying aside and let's go into the other thing. And we definitely will have another episode to touch on now the other aspects, especially the ones that the fourth way talks about quite a bit, about talking about things that we do not know and we cannot know as if we know. Also about exaggerating for various reasons. And we are going to talk about next time also about this idea that is popular in psychology these days and self-help, yet is very hard to do and be, yet it is very essential for awakening work, is to have this genuine, authentic, to be in touch with this authentic inner truth and live it, you know. So we are going to talk on that and all the, because when we don't do that, we are going against ourselves, lying to ourselves, and we are in off our essence, so to say. And then we are going to touch upon the fact that, you know, sometimes it is necessary to lie. And it is the highest, most loving, conscious thing to do. You know, as one of my teachers used to say, Francis, that, you know, you are in Nazi Germany and some guy with a long leather coat comes to your door and says, do you know any Jews here? And you do know, yeah, they are your friends and they are hidden and you know where they are. And you will be like, no, sir, I don't know them. And so all of these commandments, they are not written in stone, actually. So as become more awake and more free, there's like the conscience is not morality. So sometimes we have to break those commandments to lie, to steal, to kill, to hide out of the highest truth, you know. And this is tricky business for the formatory mind, but we are going to attempt to go into this next time. All right, everyone. Thank you and
thank you.
Stay tuned.